Welcome to the Dice Tower's coverage of the Gamma Trade Show 2013, aka Tom and Eric Go to Vegas, in which we bring you the latest board game news from the show.
Hey folks, Tom Vasel here. In the board game industry, card game industry, tabletop industry, there's a lot of armchair quarterbacks, people on the internet making, their ideas of how they think things are going. I'm one of those. I like to talk about things. But I think sometimes it's best to go straight to the horse's mouth, so to speak. So when I was at the Gamma Trade Show last week with Eric Summerer, one of the things that struck my mind was when I was at a Fantasy Flight thing, Christian Peterson was going over their numbers and talking about how they had gone up in sales by 25%. And I thought, wow, is that something that's unique to Fantasy Flight, or is it something that's across the board? So we started asking the people that we interviewed what their thoughts were on the gaming hobby as a whole. And we got a couple side issues like internet sellers and exclusive distribution. Here, let's just do a quick run through of all different people and what they said. I hope you find it interesting.
We're in boom. I think that the gaming industry is as strong as it's ever been. We have seen nice, steady, slow growth. Of course, I'm a little conservative, so that's why, kind of that inching along. But I think overall, the industry is growing. We're seeing more new gamers in. My God, we're going to PAX East this week, and we're seeing a whole bunch of people who are not traditional gamers, but are really open to becoming new gamers. I think the fact that now some of the games are becoming apps. In fact, Cutthroat Caverns is going to release as an app this year, with both iOS and Android launching pretty much at the same time. It's going to be solo play and against multiple different style AIs as other players before we get to eventually multiplayer. But what's beautiful that we see happening with the apps is people will test out a game, and if they love it, then they want to go share it with their friends and they buy the traditional game. And people who have the traditional game want to play it when they're just hanging out by themselves. So it keeps on feeding itself and growing sales. So it's terrific.
So I think the state of gaming as a whole is in a rise, right? I think it's going up. The cost of entertainment is going up. Gaming as a whole, right, as an affordable means of entertainment is great. So when we're running into a recession and people are being laid off and having a hard time making ends meet, their means of entertainment are going to change, right? And so gaming is a perfect entertainment source for families now. And so I think we're going to see a growth overall in the gaming market, excuse me, not from core hobby gamers, but from families trying to find alternative ways to entertain themselves. So I'm really excited about where we're at and what's happening in the gaming industry.
We are pretty excited, I think, because we are seeing a growth in game store and game cafe, and there are lots of websites about board gaming and blogs and reviews, and so it seems like there is a reverse of the movement where in the past the game industry was losing lots of market share to the video games, and everybody was playing their video consoles, and there was no more interaction, and now we are back to really board games are really growing stronger and more popular. So we are very excited about that situation.
It's awesome and scary. We're at a point now where we've had more good games than we've ever had before. I think the minimum bar for a good game is so much higher than it was even 5 years ago. The worst games that are released now are as good as the average game was in like the mid 80s, late 80s. The scary part is that there are a ton of really, really good games, and there's a general fear that we might be reaching saturation. In my opinion, there's always going to be room for a really good game.
The industry is reasonably healthy. I'm absolutely amazed with the quantity of new product that is coming out. Seems like daily. That's hard to keep up with. I imagine retailers are just tearing their hair out trying to figure out what to buy and what not to buy. But choice is good. I believe in free market and giving people choices and let the best products succeed. So the fact that the games are coming out with so many different publishers and new publishers showing up is, to me, it's evidence of the health of the industry.
Oh, I think it's kind of in its golden age. A lot of people are jumping on with the tabletop, bringing in a lot of new blood to the industry. Kickstarter bringing in a lot of new games to the industry. My only worry is that there might be too many products too fast, and you probably experience that all the time.
The industry's strong. It's been great. I mean, the Gamma Trade Show, even 3 or 4 years ago, was very few people coming, and it's just grown so drastically since then. It is definitely parallel to the industry. After 2007, business was down for me as well, and it's definitely been continuously on the uptick. This year will be another strong year. Again, with Kickstarter contributing to new releases, but existing releases from companies that we work for just constantly selling, that evergreen cycle, continuing to grow.
I think it's sustainable. It's, I guess, maybe not boom, but we're definitely in a great growth phase right now. I think that, we have a lot of new people coming into the market because they're tired of spending their time on the computer all day, and the last thing they want to do is spend their evenings on the computer. They want to be face-to-face with friends and family, and a board game is the best way to do it. The board game technology, in the sense that what knowledge we have around creating games, has substantially increased in the last 15 years.
It's healthy. There's a lot of new games. There's a lot of opportunities now for indie game developers, and I think the market is wide open. If you have a good idea, have good execution, and you develop a good reputation, the sky's the limit.
What about for miniature games?
Miniature game as opposed to board games?
Yes, sir.
Good question. I mean, we come from a miniature background, right? And now we're doing a lot of board games. We do have a few miniature projects upcoming. We have Wrath of Kings, and obviously we're still working a lot on Confrontation. That's a monumental undertaking, and that's going to take a little while. But you will see Wrath of Kings launch probably this year, and it will be a mass combat game, very similar to Warhammer Fantasy, not a skirmish game.
I think it's on the rise. It's fantastic. We have more and more stuff hitting the mainstream. We have Geek and Sundry with Will Wheaton and Felicia Day that is helping push geek culture from the gaming side more and more into the mainstream. We have the International Game Day coming up, which is going to be really big in Salt Lake. The main library has stuff planned. All the stores around town have stuff planned. The game store I work at, actually, we're going to be doing stuff all day. We're expecting it to be packed from open to close. And it feels like the market's getting more and more accepting of hobby-style games. We're probably still about at least 7 to 10 years before we can reasonably expect to see Ticket to Ride and, say, Toys R Us here in the States. But I think it's coming. We are slowly moving in that direction, and it's fantastic.
Right there, being a publisher and having a company, he sees a little different situation. I mean, when I'm at the game at PresCon this year, for instance, we gave away the Lifetime Achievement Award to Pete Finland, who was the president of Mayfair. And sitting at the table with him, he explained to us that it was interesting. He said that, where a game would sell 2 or 3 or 4 or 500,000 copies of a Euro-style type game, today, 20 or 30,000 is more the average. So the gaming industry, as far as sales are getting, because there's so much more competition, just like he said, is getting wider. They're not getting quite as much sales on a certain specific product. So you're seeing a lot of that. But then on the other hand, Andy Lewis from GMT, he comes to the convention every year as a dealer for us. He had 17 new games in 1 year. and they're just pumping it out, and they're obviously doing pretty well with it. So,
well, you never want to rest on your laurels, right? I mean, last year was a record year for us, but you can't count on that happening in the future. Trends change, fads come and go, whatnot, but something that's been consistent, I think people see the value of hobby games, board games, role-playing games. They're investments that you buy a game that you can play for years and years and years to come. And so I think that more and more people have come to realize that. There's shows like Tabletop that have kind of brought the hobby game to the masses. Some of our licenses we feel have brought in new people that have never been part of the hobby, and once they've seen what's inside, they can't get enough, and then they go from game to game to game. And so our plan is to keep doing that and hope to see more success with it.
Let's just take my opinion out of it and let's just look at the facts, right? The facts are that for the distributors that get those publishers as an exclusive, it's probably good for them. For the publishers that are going exclusive, I'm sure it's a good deal in some regards, but they have very difficult choices that they were faced with, which had kind of put them in a position to where they needed to go exclusive. Read what you want in the press releases, but as someone that writes press releases, those things are spun a certain way. The reality of the situation is it's a grass is always greener scenario. Wow, I get such a great deal and I get an additional this and that by going exclusive with a distributor, and then as soon as you're there, you're like, kind of wish I could sell to all those distributors again, because I could be cutting out part of my audience. I could be, hamstringing my own sales targets. You hear it all the time. The opinion from the retailer standpoint is pretty unfavorable. Every time another company announces an exclusive agreement, you have retailers up in arms. I mean, it's on ICB2, it's on the forums, it's, this is terrible, this is bad for me, I'm never carrying these product lines. But the reality of the situation is, if you're a retailer, you can't live without Settlers of Catan. You can't live without Ticket to Ride. You have to stock those games. You're now at the mercy of somebody else's terms, but these retailers have a very, very tough job to be able to do that. I don't think it affects the players quite as much. I mean, when we talk about how the industry's changed, players these days, it's much easier for them to get the games that they want without even taking part in this industry. In other words, a player can walk into a game store and say, oh, it's finally out, the new board game. I bet I can get it online for cheaper. I bet I can get it through Amazon, whatever. And that drives the retailers crazy. But it is a part of our industry.
And no offense, the video game market is hurting. You hear it all the time. People don't want to spend $60 for a game and the new system or another download or whatever it is. We're cheaper. You can have more fun socially with people. You're not just by yourself talking to some random person. It's great to sit down across from somebody. It's like a backlash. It's great.
The video game industry has certainly taken a lot of younger players away from what they would normally, when I was a kid, we had Nintendo, but we also had an entire closet full of board games, and Monopoly and Chutes and Ladders and all these types of games that were your standards, and we played those all the time. Anytime friends would come over, or even my brother and I would just play with our parents and stuff like that. And I think that was fun and wholesome, and a good thing to do with families. And I think that video gaming has taken a lot of that away, but I also observe it coming back, the family togetherness with games, and also friends getting together, adult friends getting together, and specifically to play board games. And oftentimes you'll be at a party and someone will say, hey, I got this new board game, Apples to Apples or something like that. And so there's definitely a place for those party type board games, and there's also that place for the family oriented board games, but then there's also this category of the gamer centric board games or RPGs. And I definitely don't think that that's going away anytime soon. So there's all these card games and things like that that are wildly popular as well. So gaming in general, obviously there's a market for it. So that's why I'm in it.
One of my favorite things to do is to introduce someone who's not familiar with Settlers of Catan or any of the games, Power Grid, etc., to a new game that is not Monopoly and not Sorry, etc., because it blows them away. Invariably, they're just astonished that this exists. And
retailers will always decry people that sell online, but last year at GAMA, there was a discussion with a bunch of retailers in the room, and the topic was online sellers. And everybody in the room, all these retailers are like, "Oh, we hate that, it's killing us, it's taking food out of our mouths, it's a travesty." The question I asked was, how many of you guys have some kind of online component? Every hand in the room went up. Like I said, the industry's in a lot of flux right now, and there's a lot of moving parts, and it's very hard to keep up with. You're seeing distributors who used to do no marketing whatsoever now doing a lot of marketing. Just from a GTS standpoint, there was no marketing department last year. They brought me in, and now I've hired 2 additional people. So that gives you a sense of how we've scaled, and we're not the only ones. ACD has done that as well.
Deck building seems to be huge. It's obviously here to stay. I don't know if it's going to be its own market shift or if we've kind of seen it. That's an interesting thing to see. Will this just become a monster that keeps growing and innovating, or has it kind of done its trick? Not sure.
Cooperative.
That's the irony. Is we were sort of on the beginning of a wave of co-op we didn't know was coming, and they seem to keep popping up. I think there's a lot of game plan that appeals to a slightly bigger crowd. It's easier to bring people into co-op games. I think they're more accessible to lighter gamers. We were just in a seminar where one of the things that several retailers said is they love co-op games. They can sell them to the female consumers a lot easier. So that I think will continue to grow. I think we'll also see much more innovative things done with co-op games, maybe by companies like us, where you're trying new gameplay twists, but still keeping it where everyone fights some sort of common enemy or there's a challenge that must be overcome. So I think it's still in its infancy, honestly. That one I think will keep tweaking for a long time. So who knows?
I think the state of gaming is very strong. If you've read the most recent ICV2 market report, and this ties up with pretty much everybody else's reports in the industry, is that we're experiencing strong double-digit growth. Whether that's 10% or 20% is sort of the argument. But as far as growth in the industry overall, it's been very strong ever since 2008, basically. So it's been steady in a down economy, that's pretty typical. We're kind of counter-cyclical because it's a good value if you buy, it's an expensive game, it's $50, $60 game, but you're playing it with your family and with your friends and you play it over and over again. So you're not spending $60 to go to the movies and the next week you spend another $60 to go to the movies. In this case, you're getting something that you can enjoy. So overall, I think it's fairly strong. Obviously, we're seeing a big transition with more direct to consumer support through things like Kickstarter. And some people are handling that well and some people are not. And a lot of companies are learning. You even have people using this phrase of, well, we're going to do a test Kickstarter, like to learn how to do it. So that's an interesting development in my mind, is that you see more and more big companies going that route. And the benefits of it are clear. Your revenue improves, your direct connection to the consumer improves, as opposed to sending it through sort of back channels and then eventually getting feedback. But it's definitely a sort of sea change on the other side. And I don't necessarily think that it's a panacea to all the ills of the industry. I think it's another sort of channel that needs to be managed well. So that's the biggest sort of development that I see.
You might be saying here, what, is Dan the only person who mentioned Kickstarter? Well, no, actually pretty much everybody mentioned Kickstarter. So many folks mentioned Kickstarter, so that we decided to put that in its own video. So the next video is going to be the manufacturers and distributors, what they think about Kickstarter as a whole. I think you'll find that interesting. I hope you enjoyed this. I'm glad to hear from almost everybody that they think that the state of gaming as a hobby is good. I think so. It's an exciting time. Is there too many titles, as many people said? I think I have to agree on that too, but that's a much better problem, I suppose, than there being too few titles. Anyhow, leave your comments in the comment section. Come back next time for stuff about Kickstarter. Thanks to Eric Summerer, who helped me film all this from GAMA Trade Show last week, 2013 in Las Vegas. Signing out, Tom Vasel.
Thanks for watching The Dice Tower. Join us next time for more news from the show.